What a fabulous day we have here, don't we? Imagine 50 years ago, this afternoon was also a fabulous afternoon, just none of us knew what was coming, as per normal. Hi, Gene. Okay, starting on your far right is Mark Anderson, who is a Rapid City native who survived the 72 flood. His experience turned into a career-long interest in hydrology and floods. Here are some of the highlights. Educated at South Dakota School of Mines and the University of Arizona, worked professionally in Oregon, Arizona, South Dakota, and DC, mostly for the U.S. Geological Survey. Directed science on first controlled flood equipment on the Colorado River below Glen Canyon Dam, and awarded the Secretary of Interior's Unit Award for Excellence in Service. Senior Policy Advisor to the President's Science Advisor at the White House for 3 years, Acting Director of EROS in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Sioux Falls, is that in South Dakota? Oh, yeah. Retired as Director of USGS Water Center for North Dakota and South Dakota, adjunct, professor at South Dakota Mines, and teaches water law and policy in geology field camp. Served on International Joint Commission between U.S. and Canada for Milk and St. Mary's Rivers. And I know you told the last session where Milk and St. Mary's Rivers were. Where are they at? Sounds kind of interesting. Our next panelist is Don Konechne. Don is a rancher, experienced the 72 flood. Wait till you hear this guy's story. It is incredible. And he knows what 15 inches of rain on local creeks and tributaries can do. He provided rescue efforts and witnessed the role of first responders in the rescue effort. Next to Don is Dr. Jerry Wright. Jerry experienced the 72 flood firsthand and provided rescue efforts as a young man. In his career, Jerry worked in the construction industry for 20 years, owned a business from 1975 to 1987, and then worked on the division of manager of city's solid waste division from 1987 to 2010. He served on the Rapid City Council for 2011 to 2017, obtained a PhD. And how old were you when you got that PhD? Are you sure? Oh, okay. Wasn't 17, was 71. Served on the U.S. Army, active in reserve from 1971 through 1997 and 2006 through 2007. Our first presenter of the afternoon is Dr. Perry Rahn. Perry has been affiliated with the South Dakota School of Mines and Technology since 1968, serving in the roles of assistant professor, associate professor, Professor 1979 through 1997, and as Professor Emeritus from 1997 to the present. Professor Emeritus of Geological Engineering at School of South Dakota School of Mines. He has served as Director of the Black Hills National Science Field Station from 1995 to 1999. He has authored more than 150 publications. 150 publications? My goodness, Perry. And conducted dozens of research projects and provided dozens of consulting experiences on a wide array of topics, including the impacts, effects, and analysis of the Black Hills flood of 1972. Please help me welcome to the lectern Dr. Perry Rahn.
Okay. Floods are natural events. They become disasters when the floodplain becomes urbanized. I'm going to talk about the downtown area of Rapid City. This is where the most deaths occurred from the 72 flood. Basically, it's this square mile there, but the streets are slightly offset. And Rapid Creek comes down right through in that manner. So we're bounded by West Boulevard and East Boulevard. This was the oldest map I could find from 1898. Again, Rapid Creek coming through town. You'll notice that Rapid City then was almost completely built south of the creek, not on the floodplain. That was hay country. In fact, Rapid City was called Hay Camp. Rapid Creek meanders just like any stream. This is just downstream near the airport area. So this is how a floodplain is formed. All these meanders migrate with time, gradually creating a fairly level surface adjacent to the channel. And this is the area that's subject to floods now and then. This geologic map of Rapid City shows in yellow color the floodplain. It's mapped as alluvium. And you'll notice how Rapid Creek is straight here. It's been straightened around starting at the turn of the century. Used to meander. So these are shown as streets now. Back in 1973. This was the oldest air photo I could find, 1938. Again, you have West Boulevard, East Boulevard, the train track crossing the creek right here, the Trisco Mill. Notice that it used to meander, but now was straightened, and how houses and streets are being put in the floodplain. This is 1938, so urbanization had begun by then. This is 1952, and urbanization is almost complete. Again, you can see the railroad track crossing the creek here. All these streets had names: Denver Street, St. Louis, Chicago, New York, so on. And that's 6th Street, 7th, 8th. People were moving in there unsuspecting. And by 1968, this is Rapid City, completely urbanized. And it's a dangerous situation. Next picture was right after the flood. 9 days after the flood, June 9th, 72. If you look at the houses, they're offset, cockeyed. The railroad bridge is gone. This happened at night. People who witnessed it, they could see the water rising on the wall of their home, and then floating trees come, and the whole wall collapses. It was pure horror. And you think, who was responsible here? Well, it was lots of people. Back in the 1910 and 20s, when this place got urbanized, they may have been well-meaning people, but uninformed or unconcerned about the hazard. The original owners of the land, the agricultural lands, subdivided it. Realtors moved in, surveyors, contractors, even city officials who helped develop the streets and utilities, all contributed to the disaster. Even these people back then, who knew this was a floodplain and was a dangerous place, but didn't speak out, were involved. They were complicit. They contributed to the tragedy. It happened at night. This is a discharge here in cubic feet per second. You see a peak flow of around 50,000 cubic feet per second happen right at midnight. So the flood started around 9 o'clock at night, by 3 o'clock, it's gone. So it happened at night. So there's no pictures of the flood. We know 50,000 cubic feet per second, for comparison, is equivalent to about the twice of discharge of the Missouri River over Chamberlain. So imagine two Missouri rivers coming through. Nothing, and it's not moving slowly where people have days to put sandbags out. And this came at night as pure horror. And so I'm going to end my PowerPoint here because we have other speakers. But you can ask questions. I'd just like to mention that we were fortunate to have Don Barnett as mayor at that time and Leonard Swanson as the city engineer, because they convinced the city council not to allow rebuilding down there. Instead, created a greenway. And so that area that was inundated is now a beautiful park. Okay.
Dr. Wright?
I'm glad to give this talk because I was involved with the water on Box Elder Creek at the highway bridge near what we used to call the dog track, where Pete Lean's shop is. It was a night of horror, and I'm telling the story, and I'll tell you some things that happened to me. So you remember it, and so you keep the stories alive so it doesn't happen again. That night there was probably hundreds of people doing the same thing I was doing, so I'm just one of many. Maybe there was thousands, I don't know. The next day there was a lot of them, but that night a lot of people got involved because they happened to be there. My story is, I'd come back to Rapid City from Montana to go to school in Indiana. I was leaving June 10th. I did that last hour too, June 10th. And my brother and I were going to go to Piedmont and say goodbye to a friend who was from Canada, to have a beer, to say adios and head out. We got to the bridge at Box Elder Creek, and someone told us there's a trailer house caught up against the bridge with kids in it. Well, you're going to try and save them if you can. So we went back to my folks' house. We had some ropes and axes from working in the woods. We headed back. We were late because my brothers and sisters were out misbehaving in the flood, in the rain. And my folks said we'd go get them back, so we did and got them back. Had that not happened, they would have been on the bridge when the water hit. Strike number one. Number two, as we pull up on side, we came from the south side, and I was riding with my brother Larry, and we pulled up, and I looked up out the windshield on the left side, saw a wall of water coming. First time my older brother ever did what I told him was to get the hell out of here, and he did. We backed up. Car ahead of us floated away, and I think that guy got lost. We had to let things settle down, but I think it ties in with Don was saying, I don't know, but I saw the wall of water. There was a lot of water beforehand, and then a wall of water after we got there. So maybe there were two surges, I don't know. I do not know what time it was. It was definitely very dark. Anyway, Alaska Mobile Homes used to have a lot out there. I think they may still do, of trailer houses. Trailer houses floated out on the highway like pickup sticks, where they're staggered all over the highway. We saw some flashlights or lights flashing in a tree over there by the creek, and so we got in the trailer house and started walking down the hallway, jumping on the door, getting another trailer house, got down somewhat safely to the tree. The two guys from Black Hills Co-op. We brought them back to the trailer houses, got them safe, and then there was a house on the east side of the road. It was full of people, families, and the guard had showed up with a deuce and a half. They said, would you guys go down? I don't know who us guys were, but it was a bunch of us, two to five of us. Would you go down and help get the family out? So we went down there with the truck, with the driver, and we went in the house. We said, we're here to get you out. They were thankful, but there was a young lady that asked me, will you carry my baby? It's only a week old, and I'm afraid I can't carry the baby in the water. So I did, and as we were walking to the deuce and a half, I stepped in a hole of water and went underwater. And I said to myself, as quick as I could, we were either both going to make it or we're both not. Well, we did. hit something, came back up, finished the walk, and the mother never knew how close she came to losing her baby. Anyway, later on, we kept hearing cries for help, and went around behind the same house, and along the creek we found two guys up in a tree. One guy was holding the other guy in the tree, so we had a rope, a cheap rotten cotton rope, which is not very. You wouldn't hang clothes on it, let alone go into rapid water, but we did anyway, because we had to get them out. Anyway, went in and got the guy out that was holding him, sent him in with a rope, came back, and took the guy that was in the tree, and took him the same way. The poor guy we took out first was so frozen, so cold, he was like a chair. We put him took an axe and took a door off a trailer house, made a stretcher out of it, put him in a Jeep Wagoneer, because the only hospital that was available for help was Ellsworth. Took him out to Ellsworth. That's the story, or one of many, that I wanted to share because it was horrible. I don't think if it was in daylight we would have done half the stuff we did. It would have been too terrifying. Because you'd say, I don't stand a chance. But you can't see it, you don't know any better. So you go. It just happened. But we don't want it to happen again, okay? Thank you.
Don? That's okay. I've got it, Jerry.
I promise to bring it to you, Don.
I'm pretty sure I'm the oldest one of this group sitting at this table, so I get the privilege of staying seated down this time. I bought a farm out in Box Elder Creek in 1956. I was 1 month out of the Army, 22 years old, and no money in my pocket, but I'm still on that farm yet today. But this story starts on the afternoon of June 9th. We heard that there was heavy rain up in the Nemo area, and Box Elder Creek flows through our ranch for 2.5, 3 miles. So I called up the Martin family that had the Nemo guest ranch at that time, and Mrs. Martin said that the street lights came on about 3 in the afternoon, and that the 55-gallon water barrels were overflowing ever since then. So later on that afternoon, I decided to move the cattle herd off of the creek bottom to higher ground. And about 8:30 that evening, I drove over to Blackhawk, where Highway 79 crosses Box Elder Creek. I got out, shined the flashlight in the creek, and the creek was bone dry. Horses were grazing in the creek, and the Greyhound racetrack was going full blast. Well, shortly after I got back home, we lost our power, so my wife put our 3 boys to bed. The youngest was 3 years old, and we were sitting at the kitchen table with the Coleman lantern on when the neighbor girls come running over screaming, "The creek is here, the creek is here, save our dad, save our dad." I said, "Where's your dad?" They said, "He's caught in a tree next to the house." And so I threw a rope in the back of the pickup truck. They lived across the road from us, about maybe a half a block away. And as I got over there, I could still see about 18 inches of the aluminum screen door, and I could see Mr. Snyder caught against this tree, the shoulders and his head. And as I drove the pickup into the water, the current was so strong it started moving the pickup, and I could see that wasn't going to work. So I took it back home, and I had a large farm tractor sitting in the yard with a disc hooked onto it. I thought I'll take that outfit over there, back that disc tractor into the water, get out on the disc, and throw him that rope. As I backed that tractor and disc into the water, the current also jackknifed the disc, and it wasn't going anywhere. So I turned the tractor around on the road grade, drove it into the water until the water killed the engine. I crawled out on the tractor, and I threw him the rope 6 times upstream, hoping he would catch it. Well, he did catch it, and his wife and I, she was on the tractor with me, so we hollered at him, "Tie it around your waist, tie it around your waist," and he did that, and he promptly jumped into the stream. Well, we couldn't pull him out. He'd come up for air, go under, come up for air, and we had the rope tied around the steering wheel, and we could not get him in. She said, "We're going to have to turn him loose or he's going to drown out there." So we cut him loose, and about 5 minutes later, he come walking up the roadbed, coughing up water, but he was alive. So I said to the family, "Come over to our farmhouse that we're still high and dry." No, they said, "We're scared to death, we're going to get out of here." They were able to save 1 vehicle out of 4, so they had an automobile. My wife put our boys in the truck, and we drove through one of our farm fields to get out. The road was already underwater. We went down I-90, come into Rapid City on I-190, and Don Snyder's mother had a duplex there with a two-bedroom apartment in it, and we all went there. But I could see that wasn't going to work because there was 10 of us, so I took my family farther down the street where Jean and Sharon Weber lived. Jean was a high school classmate of mine, and Sharon Weber was a head nurse at St. John's Hospital. She said, well, if everything's going on, that we better take her down there to the hospital. So her husband and I took her down to the hospital. I was still able to cross Omaha, West Boulevard in Omaha. The creek was still underneath the bridge. I dropped her off. There was a line of people standing outside on the sidewalk by the hospital. The sidewalk was blood red. I told my friend, I said, let's go out to the farm and pull my tractor out of the water. So we drove out to the Meade-Pennington County line, and that was the end of the road. The whole valley was underwater. It looked like it was a half to 3/4 of a mile wide. Trailer house frames were coming down in front of us, all kinds of trees, debris. There was a pickup truck with the headlights on floated by us. And sitting on the Meade-Pennington County line was this Army deuce and a half with about 5 men from the National Guard camp. They were sent out there to check on the Classman family that lived about a block west of us, also pretty close to Box Elder Creek. And they had a dormitory where they took care of 20 to 22 handicapped children that went to the Black Hills Workshop in the daytime. And these guys were sent out there to check on that family. They said, do you think we can get over there? And I said, I don't know what the truck can do in water, but I said, you better stop and check to see if the bridge is in or not. Well, the bridge wasn't in, but they never made it that far. They didn't make it to our driveway before the current took that truck backward down into the burrow pit. The lights went out, and it floated it out into one of our farm fields. I could see the water was headlight high around that Army truck. The men crawled out on top of the cab and was flashing a light at us. So we went to town looking for help. We went to the Highway Patrol office on East North Street, and they were locked up. So we went down I-190 into Rapid City, and right where Central High School is now today, a patrolman was blocking the road there because already Rapid Creek was coming over the top of the road big time. While we were talking to him, telling him what we needed out there, a house came down the creek. It hit the bridge down there, broke into a dozen pieces, and all caught on fire. It was flowing all between the trees between Omaha Street and where the Civic Center is today. It was a really weird-looking sight. Well, he got in the car and he took off back toward the interstate, so we did the same thing, caught up with another Army truck going to Wasta on a rescue mission. They said, go to the cement plant and you can get into the guard camp. So that's what we did, and in the guard camp was Duke Corning, head of the National Guard at that time, and Mayor Don Barnett. And then there was a bunch of people from one of the nursing homes down around Bennett Clarkson Hospital that were in there, elderly people. We told them what we needed out there, what had happened, and Duke Corning said, I'm going to send a pontoon boat out to rescue the men, and I'm going to send an Army officer out with you guys to go get to that house where all of these children are. So we drove back out to the Meade-Pennington County line. Same situation, the whole valley was still underwater, hadn't receded a bit. So he said, how do we get over there? I said, well, we got to go back, get on the interstate at the Windmill truck stop, drive west, cross over the Box Elder Creek Bridge, park the pickup, and walk through about a half mile through the hayfield, come in on the upper side of this Classman house. All right, he said, let's do that. I got down to the truck stop, and I got on the interstate, and the vehicles were backed up almost to where Butler Caterpillar is today. And he said, go around all them vehicles. Well, I went around them, and I wondered what them truckers were thinking when a guy in a pickup truck was going around everybody. But when I got to the Box Elder Creek Bridge, I could see why nobody else was going. The water was hitting debris on the upper bridge, the eastbound bridge, and it was cascading over the top of that bridge, and it was coming down between the two bridges, and it washed the piling out on the westbound bridge, and that bridge fell in. We were able to walk underneath that cascading water with barely getting wet just from the spray, and on top of that bridge was the first body. They was laying with no shirt on, laying face down, and he looked like he had fireman boots on. I touched him as we went by, and he was ice cold. We walked through that hayfield, come into the upper side of the Classman house, and Mrs. Classman said they roped all the children together with ropes, and they tried to lead them across our hayfield to the hillside, and when the children got into 1 foot of water, they all panicked and wouldn't go any farther. So they took them back to the dormitory, and it was made out of cement block, and it was a little higher up than the rest of the buildings, and it survived. All of the other buildings, including the main farm home where they had the laundry and the cooking and stuff, all of that pretty well got totaled in. So I took the Army officer home, dropped him off at the guard camp, went to Weber's home, got a couple hours of sleep, and on early Saturday morning I picked up Don Snyder, and we went back out to the Meade-Pennington County line to see in the daylight what we could see. Steam was coming off of all of the ground that had been wet before. It really was an eerie looking scene. There were trailer house frames, there were vehicles scattered all over the farm place of ours. And as we walked, we were walking down the road, it was a highway patrolman was cutting the barbed wire fences off of the county road, and the road was pretty well washed under. We were able to walk into our mailbox, which was still high and dry. From there, we could see that the Snyder home was gone, their double garage was gone, their single garage was gone, their vehicles were gone, and my tractor and disc were gone. Everything went down the creek, including the cement steps that were fastened to the Snyder home. They went with the house. That was the force of that current. Well, we walked into my place, and debris had built, water had built the debris in front of the farmhouse, and the carpet in the house was bone dry. The pilot light was on the hot water tank, and my 2 farm dogs were laying on the porch, and they were glad to see me. But our farmyard was a total mess. Water got into all of the buildings, but none of the buildings were moved. 3 great big beams came down that river, and they went through the south side of our barn, but they never came out the north side. Those beams are 40 feet long, 2 foot wide, and 10 inches thick. The reason I can tell you all of this is because one of them holding up the side of my barn yet today. I could show it to anybody that wants to see it. The other 2 beams I gave to a dairy farmer at Beulah, Wyoming, and he built a bridge over Sand Creek with them. So then that was on Saturday. So Sunday morning I come back out by myself, and the cow herd found out there weren't any fences left, and they disappeared. So I got the saddle horse, and I'm following the tracks, and they were headed up toward the interstate bridges. As I was following those tracks, here lay another body caught in the debris, no shirt on, face down, long blonde hair. I remember that. A little farther down the creek, here was another body with his face up. He was caught in debris also, and he had a green shirt on, but his head was just black and blue. I remember all of this stuff. Well, I got the cow herd out from underneath the bridge. The National Guard camp was clearing the upper bridge to try to get traffic moving again. So I moved the cow herd out of there. Now, I'll tell you where I'm a strong believer that there was a second wall of water that came down Box Elder Creek that killed everybody. In 1963, my wife hauled me up on the Nemo Road where the highway crosses Box Elder Creek for the first time, and she dropped me off, and I backpacked down that creek all the way down to our farm, probably 6, 7, 8 miles, I don't remember what. But closer to Blackhawk, the canyon walls get really close together. They're straight up and down like you see in Spearfish Canyon, and the creek flowed between it. And I believe a pile of debris built up in that canyon wall, and when the current got so strong, it broke through there, and here come this wall of water. Now, Ray Wallace was a highway patrolman in charge of a rescue mission on the south side of Blackhawk on the very creek that I was an hour before, and he told me this story. He said they were there to rescue an elderly couple, the invalid couple, living in a home right across from the dog track, and he said he had his spotlight on the REA meter, and the creek abruptly dropped 2 or 3 feet. So he said the men launched the boat, and he said about that time he heard this awful sound coming down Box Elder Creek. He threw the spotlight up the creek, and he swore the water was 10 or 12 foot tall, coming straight up and down with debris falling right in front of it. Him and another guy ran toward the Rapid City side, and they survived. He looked back to see his patrol car and all of the guys on the Blackhawk side of the creek being washed away. 2 of them ended up in trees and survived that night. The rest of them were the bodies, evidently, that ended up down on our place. So I think when that debris broke and we got that second wall, that's the one that took the Snyder buildings and my tractor. We had a complete set of corrals halfway between the interstate and where we lived. They were wiped off the face of the earth. It even sucked the pump right out from underneath from the well. I had 6 stacks of hay the day before out in a 75-acre hay field, and the next morning 4 of them were completely gone. Now, I was 39 years old when the flood come, and I was able to rebuild the farm. Now I'm 2 weeks away from turning 89, and I'd have a harder time rebuilding it. But I bought that farm for $25,000 in 1956. The Corps of Engineers let a contract for $104,500 to clean the place up in 1972. That's the end of my story. Thank you. Mark, you want this?
Take it up with you?
Okay, we'll take it up there, I guess. You need to do the introduction. Mark Anderson. Have fun.
You have Toastmasters training, don't you? Yes. All right, thanks. I always enjoy listening to Don. I've heard his talk several times now, and it's always compelling. That brings me to the point that I've noticed here in the last week or so with all the coverage of the flood and so forth, is that after 50 years, it seems like people are more willing to talk about it. I learned things in the last week that I never knew. For example, one of my classmates, our classmates, Dave Baumgartner, was washed into the flood there above, right at the mouth of the Cleghorn Canyon, rode down through, fish hatchery out in the middle of Canyon Lake, and kind of sitting there thinking maybe I was going to get out of this, and then the Canyon Lake Dam broke, and he went down through the dam and all the way down to the Catron Funeral Home. So I never knew that. He was one of my high school mates. Anyway, so it's great to have this opportunity to talk. It seems like more information's coming out, more people more willing to talk about it. And both my wife and I got wet in the flood and watched our car float away and so forth, but my presentation is going to be more technical, and so I'm not really sharing a personal story, but my wife Carla is here. She got wet too. And my sister and brother-in-law Don, they have their own stories to tell. My sister probably was the last person to drive across that bridge that Don talked about on Box Elder Creek on her way into work to at the Bennett Clarkson Hospital. Okay, so as Perry said, floods have a way of making use of their floodplains. They like to get out of their banks and do the geologic work that goes with a flood. And so floods are, it's often been said that floods are to rivers what wildfires are to forests. It's just a natural part of their geologic evolution, and they also have a way of changing things, not only physically on the floodplain, but also American history. So for example, the most deadly flood in the history of the United States was the Johnstown, Pennsylvania flood. It was a South Fork dam that failed, earthen dam, and about 2,200 people died. But as a result of that flood, it changed American law from what's called fault-based to liability. In other words, you didn't have to actually cause the flood, but you owned the dam, and now you're liable for it. It also really gave rise to the Red Cross. Clara Barton was there tending to the survivors and so forth. Then there's the St. Francis Dam. 450 people died. It was a tributary that came into Los Angeles, and it was a similar thing. It failed at midnight, middle of the night. Many of the people actually were washed out into the sea. But after that failure, the engineer Mulholland, he was a famous guy back in those days, but anyway, it changed the way the engineering profession was done. After that, you had to have professional certification, and also it required that you have to have geologic input to dams. Mississippi River flood of 1927 is articulated well in a book called red tide, and it basically changed many things about national politics. Calvin Coolidge, for example, was the president at the time, and he absolutely refused to send any federal help to assist the people that were stuck on these levees down in Mississippi. It was race relations, because they decided, the senior people in New Orleans talked them in, the Corps of Engineers, to blasting the other side of the levee, which happened to be, of course, an all black community, so tremendous tensions. He accredits the rise of or the effects of the dam, or the Mississippi River flood, to the rise of Roosevelt and the New Deal. Anyway, enough of that history. So floods have a way of changing things. My talk is, again, less personal, but really what was going on that night, and why it was such a difficult flood. This is my view, actually, my wife and I, Carla's view, in the morning, something around 4:30 to 5 a.m. We looked out, and that's the house that was in the middle of Jackson Boulevard, just a couple hundred yards up the street. So this is the real highlights of a talk that I gave to the hydrology conference here a month ago. And I'm just hitting the high points now. Each one of these items I delved into in greater detail. But why was this flood so deadly? And so I examined these factors. First of all, there is a role for government. It was, my dad used to say, well, Pactola is going to end flooding for Rapid City. So as a result of that sort of false sense of security, it allowed, the cities, as Perry talked about with the flooding, or with the zoning and so forth, that you could build your house right on the creek and have a deck over it. In fact, some of the most prestigious homes were right on the creek. Dr. Heideprim, Earl Brocklesby, Dr. Dieter, professor at School of Mines, you can go on the list. That was the place to be. Dr. Ray, dentist. Okay, so unfortunately, we thought flooding had been controlled for Rapid Creek, and of course, as you know, all the rain, essentially all the rain of the flood of 72 fell below the dam. The design of Canyon Lake Dam, there was a problem with the way that was designed, and that also contributed. I'll talk about that. There was a lack of urgency in the warnings, really, because it was outside of human observation. I'd never seen anything like this before, of course, and so then there was the problem of people accepting the warnings. Vehicles, in most cases, people decided to try to evacuate their homes in cars. Sometimes they'd put some belongings in there, and the children and whatnot, and make bad decisions about which way to go, for example, in the case of the Masters tragedy. But many people lost their life in cars. I'll come back to that. The nature of flash floods, the nature of a flash flood is the stage rises very fast, and you'll hear all the people's testimony about how quickly the water rose. In the case of Don's case with the second surge, in a way, Rapid Creek had a second surge too, and that was the failure of the dam, Canyon Lake Dam. The other problem with the nature of flash floods is the leading edge is almost heavily laden with debris. So if you happen to be in the way of that initial stage rise, you were competing with lots of debris that was moving quite fast. Okay, the problem with Canyon Lake Dam is the spillway is functioned better as a trash rack than it did as a hydraulic structure. So a lot of, as you can see, there's a car there, but initially, early on, the city was fighting these paddle boats that were there on Canyon Lake, and they, very early on in the stage rises, those paddle boats plugged up the outlet works and they couldn't open them. So it didn't take very long before the hydraulic efficiency of that structure was compromised, and water began flowing over the top of the dam. So how does a stage rise work so fast? Well, in the simplest terms, against the bed where there are trees and brush and houses and things like that, the water is impeded in its flow, so it doesn't flow as fast. The velocity is lower here, but up on top it doesn't have that same problem. So this arrow shows a higher velocity. So when the lower part is overtaken by the upper part, you get this really rapid stage rise. In fact, when we did the controlled flood on the Grand Canyon in releasing water from the dam, 230 miles downstream, we almost lost 2 scientists and a family that had set up their, they were fishing and were sitting on the beach, and they almost didn't make it out when the flood wave hit. So these floodways have a way of getting steeper actually as they go downstream. So this is just kind of a cartoon about how much water fell as rain in the Black Hills as a whole. About 670,000 is estimated based on the hydro maps we have. About 10,700 that night flowed through Rapid City. Remember now, Pactola, when it's at full pool, is 55,000 acre feet. So this was, what, 1/5 roughly of the capacity of Pactola went through there, but caused a phenomenal amount of damage. So that little dot right there, that's how much water we estimate was in storage in Canyon Lake Dam when it failed. So this is a kind of an overview. These are numbers that came from the professional reports published. These aren't my numbers. This is the area just below Canyon. Brayburn Addition is here, and Magic Canyon and so forth. But a gauge here. This was the cliffside condominiums at the time. Anyway, I've gauged there that peaked at 31,000 at about 11:15. Canyon Lake, Cleghorn Canyon peaked at about 12,600 CFS at about 10 p.m. So they're a little asynchronous. They didn't line up exactly. So the amount of water that was going into Canyon Lake was about 41,000 or 42,000 cubic feet per second. Remember now, when Rapid Creek is flowing, its average flow for the year is roughly 60 or 65 CFS. So this is huge numbers compared to normal flows. In the summertime with irrigation, sometimes demands the releases from Pactola, you can get up to maybe 100, 120 CFS, but small fraction of the kind of water that's going through the town during this flood. So again, remember that number, 42,000. So we have evidence in the high water marks, but also if you go out there today, you can see the flood scars on this tree that was there in the flood. And so something like 3 feet or so of water was flowing over the top of this wall, over the top of the dam, at the time the dam collapsed. So because of that extra 3 feet, we had more water in storage than normally would have been in there. And so when the outlet works was no longer working, the water had to get out of there, so it started flowing over and very quickly cut through the earth and fill and drained. If you've seen some of the other footage of dam failures, for example, the Teton Dam and so forth, once the water starts cutting through it, it sort of almost, it just begins to collapse. It isn't just like a trickle and gets bigger slowly. It's like it goes and then poof. So probably all the water was released from storage in probably about 30 minutes. So the USGS had done studies on making estimates. Now you all heard 50,000 cubic feet per second for the peak flow of Rapid Creek, and there's quite a story about how they decided that. First of all, it had to be connected to our long-term stream gauge, which is in Founders Park, basically, area, Rapid Creek at Rapid City. But the best estimate that they were able to make of the peak discharge was actually a Meadowbrook golf course. And that's the number they have for that, which is 57,500. Remember how much was coming in? 42,000 coming in, 57,500 going out. So that was the water that was being released from storage, and catastrophically. So this is what it looks like. The blue line is the inflows. This is and that peak there at that 42,000 number you saw. This is work done by Dr. Tom Propson at the School of Mines, and I've looked at the work carefully, and I think it's accurate. And so this dashed line would have been the outflow if the dam had not failed, if the outlet works would have held. But because it didn't, this is the outflow with failure. So that peak there is that 57,000 number, remember? So the problem was that extra amount of storage that was in Canyon Lake that got released, unfortunately, spiked the peak, okay? So right here, this was deadly for Rapid City. That robbed people of time to get out of the way, to evacuate. The stage came higher, so many houses, you know, people were up to the ceiling trying to get out. So that was a significant contributing factor to loss of life, in my opinion. So next time, my last slide. There will be another flood. Nothing's changed about the meteorology of the area. You know, the canyon geography is still the same, narrow canyon like Don talked about. So nothing's changed there. There will be another flood. I don't know if it'll be the same size, but I can tell you the probability is that it's going to be in late May or June because of the conditions of higher moisture and the amount of solar incident heating that you get that is required to make a big thunderhead. Anyway, so the example, Big Thompson flood happened just 4 years after the 72 flood, and 144 people were killed. And darned if they didn't have a flood again in 2013. I don't have the exact peak discharge on it, but they still had 9 people that passed away, as well as 2,000 homes were damaged on the Big Thompson. So it'll happen again, like it is down there in Colorado. Fortunately, there have been factors that have been taken into account to reduce that risk. Obviously, we have better warnings, and I see Susan there, with the National Weather Service and USGS Weather Service with the precipitation network, and they have the network also of issuing the warnings. USGS operates some streamflow gauges as well as early warning stage gauges. So we have better warning, no question about that. I hope that we'll take heed of the warnings next time. Because it has been an observation, but you know, a lot of people weren't around now in the 72 flood, so it's important to keep this people informed about it. Anyway, Canyon Lake Dam, the spillway's improved. It's not likely to clog with debris again, so that's good. There's also less water and storage behind the dam, although I don't think the storage was the problem. If the spillway was working, whatever comes in goes out, so we don't have that issue. But but that is that there will be loss of life next time around, because what we've learned in many areas, Arizona and Utah and so forth, people, you know, don't really understand how easy it is for a car to float in water. And so there will be loss of life, partly because the Jackson Boulevard is wider, Omaha is wider, so that reduces the roughness coefficient that impedes the flow. So next time we have one, the velocity through town is going to be greater, and hopefully we'll figure out a way to make sure we can close the streets and evacuate people out of the flood path next time. So those are my comments. Thank you.
All right, any questions?
How did the creek get its name?
How did the creek get its name? Hold on.
It was a Sioux Indian word, Minnelusa, fast water.
Any other questions? I have one for Mark. if we had another flood similar to 50 years ago, with the same kind of downpour and everything like that, similar situations, would the current Canyon Lake Dam be able to withstand it?
Definitely the engineering that went into that, the spillway is designed to be able to handle that size of flood. So I guess the answer is yes, but you know, doggone it, dams do fail. And there's plenty of examples around the world. And of course, you know, I didn't mention this, but there is a national inventory of dams. Every dam in the United States has been inventoried as to its age and its and its risk factors. We have 2 dams here in the Black Hills that are on the high hazard list. Of the 90,000 dams in the United States, 15,000 are rated as high hazard. We have 2, Canyon Lake and Pactola. It's not because of any known flaws. It is just that if they did fail, there would be a lot of loss of life.
Canyon Lake washed out in 1907.
What's the question?
Oh, your little book says that.
Canyon Lake washed out?
Canyon Lake washed out in 1907.
Yeah.
Let me share it.
Rebuilt until it was a CCC project in the 30s somewhere. So I'm wondering if there's any flooding that occurred between those 2 dates.
There was an old newspaper article I read that, of course, Rapid Creek provided water to Rapid Valley irrigators, and some speculative development was occurring in the Canyon Lake area, and some people built a log dam at Canyon Lake. And I read in the paper, it's a long, long time ago, early 1900s or late 1800s, and the irrigators came up one night and blew it up. That's the only thing I know about Canyon Lake being wiped out one time. Do you hear that story?
Yeah, I thought they started on fire too.
Well, maybe they tried to start on fire. Water's our next fighting word, by the way.
There was a lot of damage actually in the 1907 flood in Hill City as well, believe it or not. And State Canyon, actually there's reports of large boulders that was rooted down
They were there.
across what now, of course, is Highway 79 in 1907. Deadwood was damaged in 1917.
I see that we're 6, 7 minutes past our deadline, so thank you all for coming. Thank you for the panel.